The doctor who gave chemotherapy to patients who did not have cancer.
In private practice, doctors have little to no oversight. There's nobody there to really check what they're doing.
If Mr. Hippocrates used herbs to cure every disease known to man, then 2,000 years later, why aren't we doing so?
According to the United States Department of Health and Human Services, 15,000 Medicare patients a month are by MD treatment, and nobody goes to jail.
The one thing that I want people to sort of know and understand is that this is not a new thing. There's been a war on natural medicine.
He's a 17-year-old male coming in with 2 entrance wounds.
I have a 27-year-old female complaining of severe stomach pain in the lower right side.
A new study suggests medical errors may be the third leading cause of death in America. Many errors go, apparently, according to the study, they go completely unobserved in official records.
It makes me feel that we don't matter.
Thinking about surgical theater.
A country with such remarkable innovation.
They don't know a discharge date.
And yet so many are struggling.
Every one of us can name some people we saw suffer to death.
How do you feel when you're sick? Everyone naturally hopes for the best possible outcome, right? Facing a serious health issue, be it a chronic or life-threatening illness like cancer, or a significant health event like a stroke, heart attack, or severe injury, can throw your entire life off balance. When we're in pain or grappling with health problems, we turn to doctors and hospital staff, trusting that their years of professional training will help us heal. But what happens when the very people we rely on for healing make mistakes?
Hippocrates went to Africa to learn his craft. And the fact of the matter is that Mr. Hippocrates, 2,000 years ago, used herbs to cure every disease known to man. If Mr. Hippocrates used herbs to cure every disease known to man, then 2,000 years later, why aren't we doing so? Because the healer has been educated and the substance he used is artificial. And he is totally unaware of that. Why? Because he learned his craft from an armchair position.
You hit on the third leading cause of death in the United States, and I'm sure most of us could figure it's either heart-related or cancer or diabetes, things like that. Can you clue us into what that is and why?
Thank you for asking that, because this is the 10,000-pound gorilla in the room that nobody's talking about. The third leading cause of death, as published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, is MD-directed treatments. This means you go to a medical doctor, an MD, he gives you a treatment and you die from it. According to the United States Department of Health and Human Services, 15,000 Medicare patients a month are killed by MD treatment, and nobody goes to jail.
In a chilling revelation from the National Institutes of Health, recent studies point to a terrifying truth. Medical errors may be responsible for as many as 251,000 deaths annually in the United States. This grim statistic ranks medical mishaps as the third leading cause of death, trailing only heart disease and cancer. What's more shocking is the comparison with other developed nations. Error rates in the U.S. far exceed those in countries like Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom. Yet, a mere fraction of these errors are ever reported. But what happens when these errors come to light?
A handful of terrorists fly 2 planes into the Twin Towers. 3,500 people die and we go to war. But 15,000 people a month are killed by medical doctor treatments, and we don't bat an eyelash.
Echoing this sentiment, recent headlines tell horror stories of nurses administering the wrong potent drugs and surgeons removing incorrect body parts. These are not isolated incidents, but indicators of a widespread crisis in patient safety. Published in the BMJ, a comprehensive study led by Martin Macri of Johns Hopkins University revealed that medical errors in healthcare facilities are disturbingly common, claiming more lives each year than respiratory diseases or Alzheimer's. Since a shocking 1999 report by the Institute of Medicine labeled preventable medical errors as an epidemic, the debate has raged on how to tackle this issue. But are we any closer to solving it? Despite ongoing discussions, the question looms large. Are hospitals doing enough to prevent these deadly mistakes? Or are systematic issues like communication breakdowns during patient handoffs continuing to put lives at risk?
We have been, for the last 100 years, kind of led into this false belief, I think it was Marcus Welby that started it, that the medical doctor is king and knows everything about everything. And really, you need to just shut up and follow your medical doctor's advice.
Did you ever catch an episode of Marcus Welby, MD, back in the 70s? It was the go-to medical drama of the era, and honestly, it wasn't too shabby as far as TV entertainment went. The show wasn't afraid to tackle the taboo topics of the time, making it a trailblazer in its own right. However, its widespread appeal brought about a peculiar, and let's be real, somewhat hilarious complication. Imagine this. Every week, the show features a new peculiar disease, and suddenly, half the town thinks they're suffering from the same exotic illness. Can you blame them? After all, if Dr. Welby said it because he is a doctor, then it must be true, right? This phenomenon got so notable that it was christened Marcus Welby syndrome by an observant ER doctor. Picture it, folks marching into hospitals armed with a self-diagnosis of Hansen's disease or Sydenham's chorea, thanks to last night's TV episode. Talk about taking your favorite show a bit too seriously.
In the early 1900s is when things really began to change. And they began to change because Rockefeller got involved with modern medicine, or got involved with medicine. And John D. Rockefeller was an oil magnate. So he owned a company called Standard Oil, which was essentially a monopoly on the oil industry because he owned about 90% of the oil industry. And when monopolies became illegal, the company got broken down into several companies that we know today as Chevron, Exxon, and Mobil. John Rockefeller was trying to figure out how he could get his hands into the health field. And one of the things that he discovered in his own business, which was oil, was the scientists were discovering that many of the vitamins that we know today were being discovered in oil products, okay? Now, I know that sounds really odd, but they were discovering certain vitamins. So, you know, the first vitamin that was discovered was vitamin A. The second vitamin that was discovered was vitamin B, and so on and so on. And so when he discovered these vitamins in these petrochemicals, he saw an opportunity in his mind where we can use oil or the byproducts or the waste products of oils to create these things that could be sold to people in healthcare, okay? And so in an attempt to figure out how to get involved in the medicine, he went to Andrew Carnegie. And Andrew Carnegie linked him up with a guy who created what is known today as the Flexner Report. Now, the Flexner Report by itself alone changed everything that we know in the medical industry. This report essentially was the cause of almost 50% of all medical schools closing in the US and pretty much 90% of all Black medical schools closing in the US, okay? And essentially what the idea of the report was to centralize medicine and also to make sure that the only things that would be handed out from practitioners of medicine was going to be patented drugs, okay? And that was one of the things that Rockefeller really put his money into because he donated about $100 million. And part of what that $100 million was going to do was act as grants for these schools who were willing to practice medicine in the way that the Flexner Report said that they should practice medicine, okay? And one of the primary schools that were used as an example was Johns Hopkins University, okay? And so schools that were compliant with practicing medicine in the way that the Flexner Report told them that they should practice medicine, these are the schools that got funding. The schools that refused to practice medicine in that way, and what I mean by practice medicine in the way that the Flexner Report wanted them to, and I'm surmising, but essentially what it wanted them to do was remove everything natural, okay? No using herbs, no using Reiki healing, no using chiropractic, no using acupuncture, no using anything holistic. The only thing that you can use were these patented drugs,
America has witnessed the evolution of its healthcare. Even before the country was officially a country, these periods can be divided into 6 hilarious historical periods. First up, the charitable era, when your friendly neighborhood doctor might accept a chicken as payment. Then, it's on to the origins of medical education era, where doctors probably knew less about your body than your grandmother. Next, the insurance era, or as I like to call it, guess who's paying for dinner? Fast forward to the government era. Big Brother steps in. But can he even find the stethoscope? Don't forget the managed care era, when healthcare tried to tidy up with as much grace as a toddler in a china shop. And finally, the consumerism era, where shopping for doctors became almost as complex as choosing your next Netflix binge. Who knew healthcare could be such a wild ride?
Most people in the United States have no idea at all of the history of the evolution of medicine in the United States.
What happened between hair and hair? A lot happened.
Early 1900s, it was a relatively level playing field between the chiropractors, the osteopaths, the homeopaths, and the MDs.
Ever wondered how to dodge side effects when you're sick? Many turn to the quirky world of complementary and alternative medicine, CAM, for answers. Back in the 1800s, this was all the rage. Enter homeopathy, the brainchild of Samuel Hahnemann, who figured out that fighting fire with fire, or fever with fever, might just work. Curious, right? He developed treatments that mimicked the disease's symptoms to cure it. Sounds crazy, but it caught on. Meanwhile, osteopathy and chiropractic medicine popped up, preaching the gospel of letting the body heal itself. Imagine doctors saying, "You're like a machine. If all parts are in tune, you're set." Simpler times, huh? Then there's hydrotherapy, which had folks chilling in mineral baths like ancient Roman celebrities. Why not soak your troubles away? Despite its decline as conventional medicine rose to dominance, alternative medicine had planted seeds of holistic healing that would grow in popularity again.
In 1915, 1920, there was something called the Flexner Report. The Carnegie Corporation funded this man named Abraham Flexner. He went all around the country, and he went on stagecoach and train and horseback. This was before the interstate highway system, right? It took Flexner 5 years to do this. He went all around the country and did an inventory of all of the medical schools that prescribed drugs. He brought the list back to the Carnegies, who owned drug companies, and then the Carnegies and the Rockefellers gave millions of dollars of free money to the medical schools and hospitals in the United States that were prescribing drugs. That was the beginning of the end.
But Flexner? Oh, he wasn't a physician. He was an educator, yet he made waves as a medical reformer and researcher. Imagine that. Despite his outsider status, he won kudos in the medical community for ages. But wait, plot twist. Come the 2010s and early 2020s, folks in medicine started giving his work the side eye, leading to a bit of a rebrand in 2021. That's right. The Abraham Flexner Award for Distinguished Service to Medical Education got a snazzy new title, the AAMC Award for Excellence in Medical Education. So what caused this rethink, you ask? Well, it turns out Flexner's famous 1910 report, which once set the gold standard for medical training, had some unintended consequences. His recipe for success? A rigorous cocktail of 2 years of basic sciences followed by 2 years of clinical training. Sounds solid, right? But here's the kicker. Back in the day, many medical schools just couldn't keep up. They didn't have the dough or the resources, which led to a drastic cut from 155 to just 66 schools. Among the casualties were 5 of the 7 institutions dedicated to training black physicians. The ripple effects? Today, only 5% of American physicians are black, even though black Americans represent 13.4% of the population. Had those 7 schools stayed open, we'd have an extra 35,315 black physicians as of 2020. That's a lot of might-have-beens, huh? What do you think? How different would things be if those schools had survived?
After the Flexner Report, there was no more level playing field in the United States. And the MDs started a juggernaut that's taken off. Most people in the United States think that the predominant medicine here, MD-directed pharmaceutical medicine, we think that those guys are top dog because their therapeutics are better than the homeopaths or the naturopaths or the chiropractors. It's not. They're in the driver's seat because of political and financial coalitions that were built at the turn of the century that most people have no idea of at all. And it's a gigantic problem.
Ever wondered who really controls the wealth and power in capitalist societies? Well, it's not the working or middle class, but rather the select few in the corporate world. Vicente Navarro, a sharp social analyst and globetrotting academic, dives into this in his thought-provoking collection, Medicine Under Capitalism. Why is healthcare distribution so skewed? And what's with the exorbitant drug prices? Did you know that until recently, Big Pharma followed the blockbuster model, aiming drugs at common chronic diseases to rake in billions? But as this model wears out, enter the niche buster model, targeting smaller groups with even more pricier medications. Prices for disease-modifying drugs, like those for multiple sclerosis, have shot from $8,000 to a whopping $60,000 annually. And cancer treatments? They're hitting the roof at $100,000 per year. How can they justify these prices? Spoiler, it's not about recovering R&D costs. And don't get me started on drug regulations, or the lack thereof. In many developing countries, drug approval is just a formality, with lax standards allowing harmful drugs to flood the market. Even in the US and EU, regulations are twisted to favor industry profits over patient health. So, are we patients or just pawns in their profit-driven game?
It's crazy, right? It's the third leading cause of death. And yet, when the government makes noise about messing with people's insurance, everybody freaks out. And that's a whole other thing to talk about, isn't it? Because what is medical insurance? When you buy medical insurance, what are you doing? You're betting that you're going to get so sick you will not be able to afford it. Right?
Yeah.
Right. And then, so you pay good money every month to gain access to a system of medicine that's the third leading cause of death in the United States. We need our heads examined, quite frankly.
It seems that many of us are still trapped in Dr. Welby's bygone era, steadfast in the belief that our local doctors possess the omniscient answers to every ailment. It's as dramatic as trusting a map drawn by Columbus to navigate today's digital world.
People are suffering needlessly. You wouldn't believe, as God is my witness, you would not believe the things that I've seen people recover from in holistic medicine. The body's ability to fix itself is remarkable. And most of the time, all that the body needs to do that is the raw materials that it needs to do that. And we need to stop eating food that's hurting the body. You know, if you put diesel fuel in an unleaded engine, even if it's a brand new Ferrari, it's going to run like crap if it runs at all. And there's nothing wrong with the car, it just had the wrong fuel. It's the same with the human body. You give the human body the raw materials that it needs, clean up the diet, Superman, Superwoman. And you know, if you don't get to super status, then at least your blood pressure normalizes, at least your arthritis goes away, at least your anxiety and panic attacks go away, and you can sleep through the night.
As the AMA's influence grew, there was a noticeable decline in physician accountability. The AMA's code of ethics effectively shielded doctors from the repercussions of their mistakes, which sometimes led to patient harm or death. It also discouraged medical professionals from disclosing such errors in court. A respected figure of the U.S. Army medical staff and the U.S. Public Health Service, Dr. Norman Barnsby, criticized the AMA's code of silence as akin to the mafia's omerta, punishing any doctor who spoke out about medical failures with professional exile. By strategically influencing medical education, research, and practice, all of these power brokers, from the AMA to Rockefeller, effectively monopolized the field. This orchestrated allopathic transformation of medicine and marginalization of traditional healing methods has profoundly shaped everybody's health today. But it doesn't have to control your health. Check out the link in the description or top right corner of your screen to discover a range of high-quality products we've carefully selected to empower you in taking control of your health. For tailored assistance, where we personally assess your needs and steer you towards optimal well-being, again, check out the link in the description or top right corner of your screen for Prism to receive a complimentary consultation and learn more. Don't let them fool you. Subscribe to our channel.